After a pretty disappointing 2024 season that did end on a high note for Michigan beating both Ohio State and then Alabama in their bowl game, the Wolverines are expecting to have a much better season this year, but with an incoming judgment from the NCAA, which we were trying to wait for before releasing this video, did not end up happening. Shocking that the NCAA took forever. Who would have thought? Anyways, Michigan is expecting to have a really good season with Bryce Underwood at quarterback this year. But as a true freshman, I think that some early struggles are going to be expected, in my opinion, that maybe people aren't quite realizing. Now, they do start with a home game against New Mexico. That one's going to be pretty easy. New Mexico lost their starting quarterback, Devin Dampier, to the transfer portal. He's now a Utah Ute. This is a 100% chance for Michigan to win. But I think the first really big test is going to be a road trip to Oklahoma. It's a tough environment, and Oklahoma is going to be a very, very good team this year. John Matier transferring in from Washington State to be their starting quarterback. We saw how Washington State transfer did last year with Cam Ward at Miami. And I think that John Matier is very close to the talent level of Cam Ward. He's a very talented dual threat guy. Oklahoma found themselves a gem in the transfer portal. Not to mention the fact that they also got Jaden Ott from California. I think he's going to do a very solid job as the starting running back and make one of the scariest duos in the backfield in college football, especially because this is a road game for Bryce Underwood in his first ever road start in college football, and the level of competition being a severe uptick from the first game against New Mexico. I think that Michigan is going to come into this one pretty confident and get smacked around despite that by Oklahoma. We have the Sooners winning this game.
And the following two games are going to be an interesting 2 weeks for the Wolverines as Sharon Moore will be suspending himself from these two games and will not be able to coach. It won't really matter in week 3 against Central Michigan. The Wolverines are just the more dominant team here. Every single year they churn out great defenses, and this year is going to be no different. Yes, they have lost two first round picks to the NFL in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, but they always bring in solid players to fill in those trench spots and develop them into NFL prospects, not to mention the edge rushers they have will be some of the best in college football. Central Michigan also won't have a chance because Connor Stallions is not on the sideline spying against the other team he coached for. So the Wolverines will pick up a win here and move to 2-1. And then it is a really tough road trip against Nebraska. And the Cornhuskers are going to be a very interesting team next season. We saw last year that they got off to a hot start and even were able to compete on the road against the eventual national champs, with that game coming down to the wire. And they do have a good amount of returning production going into next year. They have Dylan Raiola back as their starting quarterback after a very solid year, and I think he will continue to develop into a better quarterback this season. They went out and got a lot of senior offensive linemen to help protect Dylan Raiola because that was an issue last year. They did lose a couple of their skill position players, and Raiola will have to be able to create new connections with the incoming transfers or players rising through the ranks at the program. And defensively, Nebraska, like I said, started off very hot, and that was on the back of having a very good defense. If they're able to keep that momentum going into this season, I expect Nebraska to be another competitive team. I don't think they're going to compete for a Big Ten championship, but they will give a lot of teams some scares. In a home game against Michigan, once again, to open up Big Ten play, this is not an easy ask for Bryce Underwood. Nebraska fans have been selling out their stadium for the past 6 decades. It's one of the toughest places to play in all of college football. And with the more experienced quarterback here, we actually like Nebraska to upset Michigan here. It's going to be an interesting one, especially considering Bryce Underwood now does have a tough road game under his belt, even though it is a loss to Oklahoma. So maybe he will be a little bit more ready for it. But to open up Big Ten play, we got the Cornhuskers getting a win over the Wolverines.
For the bye week, I do think that this next game is going to be a little bit easier. Wisconsin's going to have a pretty tough time this season, one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. Michigan is definitely a good part of that. I think the Wolverines are significantly more talented than Wisconsin. You look at Wisconsin, and they have Billy Edwards Jr. at quarterback. He was one of the lower rated transfer portal quarterbacks, and I think that he's going to struggle quite a bit in this offense. I just I don't see that Wisconsin has enough talent anywhere. You look around the roster, it's just not going to compete with a team like Michigan. So we do have the Wolverines bouncing back in Big Ten play to get this win. And then a road trip to USC very far across the country. And this was quite the game last season. USC gave Michigan a run for their money in the big house. And now you're taking a young quarterback who has not yet won a road game all the way to Southern California to face a really solid USC team. They're not going to have Miller Moss this time. It will instead be Jaden Mayava. And he performed very well. And I would say a comparable game is Notre Dame last season, where he had a really solid performance until throwing two pick sixes near the end. He really is going to have to work on the turnovers this season. But if he can do that, USC is going to be a very solid team. I think with Michigan going on this big of a road trip, this might be the common theme early on in the season. Road trips are going to hurt Michigan early because of how young Bryce Underwood is. Even though the Trojans' home field advantage isn't necessarily as good as some of the others we'll see in the Big Ten, I think that USC is a comparable enough team. You look at their wide receiver core that they have this season for Mayava to throw to. Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane both expected to be very high draft picks. I think that USC is going to have a great offense. Michigan has a good defense. When you actually compare the two teams, that's going to be a really good matchup. And the Michigan offense, I think, is going to struggle quite a bit. USC is known for not having a great defense, but last year they were able to hang in it. And this year, I think USC is going to have improved a little bit more than Michigan did. So, with the home field advantage, I think the Trojans will get it done and drop Michigan to 3-3.
And the schedule after that does not get much easier. It is another rematch. The third year in a row, Michigan gets to play Washington after beating them in the national championship in 2023. But Washington avenged that loss at home last season. Now they get to come to the big house, and Washington has a lot of things going for them. Damon Williams is expected to be the starting quarterback this season after filling in for Will Rogers a couple times last season, including in their bowl game against Louisville, where he looked very, very good. The upside for Damon Williams Jr. is some of the highest in college football. They also have Jonah Coleman returning as their starting running back, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. If this offense can be as good as their potential is, Washington's going to be a scary team to play against. The defense has also made strides in year two under Jed Fish. I do think that the home field advantage of the Wolverines will make this a very close game. But this is going to be one of the few games where I think Michigan is actually outclassed just slightly. The defense, like Jonah said, is going to be the strong point for the Wolverines, despite who they've lost. The secondary has some solid players at the corner positions. The safeties are a little young and inexperienced, but just freak athletes. The linebacker core has most of their starters returning, including Ernest Hausman and Jason Barham. But I do think the firepower of this Washington offense is going to be what carries them to a win here, dropping Michigan to 3-4 before a road trip against Michigan State. The Spartans have been dying to get a win in this rivalry game as it has not been fairly competitive the last few years. And this might be one of the best opportunities that Michigan State has to beat Michigan in the last few years. It is a home game for the Spartans, and they have the advantages in so many key positions on the offensive side of the ball. Aiden Childs in year two at Michigan State, I think, is going to take some steps forward. He will have to limit his turnovers as much as possible, especially against such a good Michigan defense. but he has one of the best young wide receivers in the country to throw to in Nick Marsh after an incredible freshman season last year. The concern for the Spartans will be their defense and can they get some stops after losing so much of their starting production from last season. But against a Michigan offense that will once again be the same thing over and over again, a ground and pound kind of team, as they brought in Justice Haynes from Alabama to be their starting running back, expected to be one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. This is going to be a really close game, and Michigan State will be able to keep this one close. But at the end of the day, Michigan has been on a roll in this rivalry game. And even though Bryce Underwood has not won a road trip yet, this will be his first opportunity to do so in one of the biggest games of the year for the Wolverines. They will get back to 500 here, picking up a win against a very underrated Michigan State team. And then they return back home to face Purdue, and the Boilermakers are just going to be one of the worst teams in college football. Have absolutely nothing going for them. One singular starter returning on the entire team in Devin Mockabee at the starting running back position, and he can only do so much against other teams. But against a Michigan team that has some of the best defensive linemen in college football, he will not be able to move the ball very much. Purdue will drop this game, and Michigan will move to 5-4 heading into their final bye week.
And out of that, you have two pretty easy road trips. We don't really think much of either Northwestern or Maryland this season. This Northwestern game will be a little bit interesting, though, because it's going to be at Wrigley Field, and it's not going to be much of a home advantage for Northwestern. And if anything, I think Michigan fans are going to be outnumbering the Wildcats in this one. I expect Michigan to be a significantly better team than Northwestern. Home field advantage is really no factor here. We have the Wolverines getting this win pretty easily. And then same kind of thing with Maryland. You got a true freshman starting quarterback, not a great transfer portal class, not a lot of returning production. That all just sums up to have a pretty bad season in the Big Ten this year. And when you actually look at it, Michigan plays the three worst teams in the Big Ten all in a row, which is going to be pretty nice for helping out their win totals. They'll get wins against Purdue, Northwestern, and now Maryland to bring them up to 7. But I think that's going to hinder them a little bit because after having three very easy games, they'll be back home to face Ohio State and might not be as prepared. Though this game, as you can see by the percentage, is always going to be a 50-50. The Buckeyes coming off of a national championship season where they did lose to Michigan at home. Now they have to go on the road. What I will say is that after Michigan beat Ohio State last season, something clicked for this team, and it really makes me think that they're going to have a much better chance to beat Michigan this next season. When you look at what the teams have brought in through the transfer portal and returning production, I think production-wise, they're going to be pretty similar. Both teams have brought in solid transfers, but Ohio State is still the better team than Michigan. It didn't matter last year as they lost this game, but this season, I do think that Ohio State is due for a win against Michigan and is going to get that to drop the Wolverines to 7-5.
And we understand that Michigan has had all the momentum the last 4 years of beating the Buckeyes, including last year when they were such severe underdogs. But like Jonah was saying, after the loss last year, something clicked. And if you watch the game from 2024, you realize that the Buckeyes did not take advantage of any of the injuries that Michigan had on defense, particularly in the secondary when you have some of the best wide receivers in the country. And I think going into this year, trying to avoid losing 5 in a row to their bitter rivals, it will be a complete game plan switch up here. That is not to say that it is impossible for Michigan to win this game. If they were able to win last year with that kind of a team as such big underdogs on the road, flip the script here with it being a home game for the Wolverines, going for 5 in a row. It easily could be another big upset win for the Wolverines to cap off an otherwise lackluster season, get them to 8 wins. But we do think that Ohio State is now in a mindset where they know how to compete with this Michigan team.
I think the big thing is really just being able to throw the football more. Michigan's weak point this year is definitely going to be their secondary on defense. They're always good on the lines, but I think the secondary is going to be a little bit weaker. And when you match them up against the wide receiver core that Ohio State has, if the Buckeyes throw the football, they really should just be able to torch Michigan this season through the air. Our way too early projection for the Wolverines was 8.8 wins, and we had them going 9-3. A few things changed with some of their opponents, which is the main reason that they ended up dropping a couple more games, and the projection also came down to 7.9 wins, 5.6 and 3.4 in Big Ten play. The floor for Michigan, though, is only one game worse than we have it right now, and the only one we flipped there is the Michigan State game, just because it's a rivalry. It's been a while since Michigan State won, which is why we ended up giving that one to Michigan, but they certainly do have a better chance this upcoming season than they have the past few years. The ceiling though, I think it's going to be 10-2, and that is independent of the 8-1 Big 10 ceiling. That means they could potentially lose two games in the Big 10 and go 10-2. But if I had to pick two games for Michigan to lose, if they had the best season they possibly could, I think it'll be Oklahoma and Ohio State, the two best teams they played. A lot of those other games, though, to watch out for. Obviously, the other three losses, Nebraska, USC, and Washington, those are all going to be very good teams. Do not overlook them if you are a Michigan fan. I think that Michigan still has a little bit of work to do to get back to where they were the year that they won the national championship. So, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.